We're going to continue this series over here where we're learning about the kashrut and different problems that can occur inside the kitchen that we've been speaking about over the last many sessions. It's about the 7th or 8th installment already as we get this underway over here. We're just over here. I like to go to different places while I record. In yesterday's session we were talking about different case scenarios that can happen within regards to milk or meaty products that could spill on the thing. Now we're talking about a case where you're using one oven for both meaty and dairy foods. What's a code of conduct, let's just say over here, within regards to if someone wants to do this over here? What's the code of conduct? That's what we're going to learn about over here. We're going to start off by the topic of using one oven for both meat and dairy foods. Okay. Obviously, one of the most common issues of meat and milk today, basar b'chalav as we call it, is the use of one oven for both meat and dairy foods. That many people did this back in the day. Many people might have will use two ovens, two things, but it wasn't like that the whole time. So now let's look about it. The basar b'chalav problems when there's one oven used. Let's look. Use of an oven for both meat and dairy, obviously there's three issues here. The first one will be meat coming in direct contact with the dairy, first thing. Then there's the issue of reicha. What is that? That's an aroma over here. That's another issue. Obviously when there's baking and roasting simultaneously in an oven, there's absorbed aroma from each other. Then there's something called zeya, which is different. It is steam. Obviously, steam is emitted when you're cooking these foods, and we're going to look about that in due course. Okay. Now the issue, when it comes in contact over here, what is the main issues over here? That's what we're going to explore as we start this off now over here. Okay. Obviously, one may not place meat and dairy foods in an oven so that two types of food touch each other. Two foods that touch while roasting or baking absorb the taste from each other. This obviously will result in the entire food or part of it becoming prohibited. So that's there's that issue over here where, let's say, a part of the food or might end up becoming prohibited by there's a touching of each other. So that's how careful one's got to be, not to make sure these two things they don't touch over here. Okay. Okay. That's the first issue over here. In addition, foods must not be placed on the oven floor if meat gravy may spread and reach your dairy foods over here. Or melted cheese may reach your meat. They may not be placed on two shelves above each other if there's a possibility that they will drip onto each other. Obviously, they may not be placed in a manner that may cause them to splatter onto each other, even after all these precautions have been taken. Obviously, we don't contend with two serious problems. Now, there's issues here of something called reicha, which we talked about before. Reicha miltai. Well, there's this phrase which is very commonly used if people are learning rabbinic exams, where there's a concept called reicha milta. So how does it apply here? That's something that we're going to learn here. All foods, obviously, they emit some sort of aroma when they are cooked or they are baked. Obviously, when several foods are cooked together in an enclosed area, like an oven, and they will impart like an aroma, taste to one of each other. Cooking or baking meat and dairy simultaneously causes meat and dairy to emit aromas, let's just say, that absorb in each other. So that's a problem. So one should avoid any possibility of aroma being imparted, obviously from non-kosher to kosher. That would be even more severe, you could say. If kosher food inadvertently absorbs aroma from non-kosher food, or meat and dairy, it absorbs aroma from each other. B'diavad, the food might be able to be eaten in circumstances, but we'll highlight the different ways and the code of conduct with examining all of this also. As the time goes on. Okay. I'm just having a breakfast at the moment, so excuse me at the same time. Okay. There's different problems. One should not deliberately cause meat and dairy to absorb aroma from each other, obviously. So you can't roast meat and dairy concurrently in an oven even if they don't touch each other and there's no chance of the meat gravy reaching the dairy food. I'd say there's dry meat and dairy foods were roasted simultaneously in an oven. But the avad, they may both be eaten if there's no contact. Then there's a microwave over here, an oven. Obviously there's greater problems with the microwave. Why? Because there's a problem of recha since it's completely enclosed. Also there's an issue of zeya over here with the microwave. If meat and dairy, even dry foods, are cooked together in a microwave oven, obviously a rabbi should be consulted. And now bread should not be baked in an oven with meat. Obviously it's going to be baked together. The bread should not be eaten with dairy unless no other bread is available. Wow. So that's interesting of it. The Rama provides that one is unable to eat the bread alone, or that the dairy food cannot be eaten without bread. Okay. That will be the criteria. Now, point number E, one may bake meat and dairy foods simultaneously in one oven if one of the foods is completely covered there. So you need it to be covered. But this is learned in Yoredea in chapter 108 of it. The covering should be tight enough to prevent the aroma from spreading. Thus, although the cover needs to be airtight, it should be tightly fitting cover also. However, baking meat and dairy simultaneously in an oven has many potential kashrut problems and should be avoided even when they are covered. So, if you're talking about baking here, covering is not going to be sufficient according to this book over here. Okay. Okay, the problems of zeya now. Zeya, as we said before, is steam. So we know that there's a problem with it. Steam emitted from foods during cooking, it can be severely problematic of it. All food give out steam while being cooked or baked. Obviously, halacha considers the steam of any liquid to have the status of food. Thus, steam of milk that condenses into water is halakhically milk over here. While steam of meat gravy is considered meat. So that's staggering. One could be thinking they're having a water over here or something like that, when really they're having, they could be having meat or milk. So these cases really are not totally obvious at all in any shape or form over here. Okay, let's continue. Now, since solid foods produce only a negligible amount of steam, we aren't concerned about zeya when cooking solid foods unless steam is visibly rising from the food. When steam imparts its taste to any surface in its path, obviously it rises and transfers its taste to the oven roof regardless of distance from the oven roof, obviously. I think Igrod Moshe will expound on that. In addition, if the cooking takes place in a confined area, obviously in the kitchen oven, obviously there's a possibility of condensed water vapor falling back into food. So the driplets of the water could actually clash back in. When food is cooked in a covered pot, the zeya is of no concern since the cover keeps the steam in the pot. So obviously, when it's a liquid or solid food in a covered pot, we don't worry about zeya. Now, if it's a solid food in an uncovered pot, it's reported over there is no zeya problem over there. So in that kind of sense, there is that leniency if it's a solid food over there, which is interesting. Okay, let's conclude. Obviously, this problem of zeya pertaining to basar v'chalab obviously is very serious. And whenever meat in liquid is cooked in an open pot in an oven, steam is emitted which carries the taste of the meat and could come on the roof of the oven. When liquid dairy is subsequently cooked in an oven, that steam also rises, absorbs the meat taste from the roof, and condenses and falls back into the dairy. The milk will be considered obviously now basar v'chalab and will be prohibited, as we would assume over here. Okay. Now let's see. There's a proper use of an oven for both meat and dairy. What's the code of conduct for it, if you've got that? Those who have only one oven, which is many people, especially back in the day, They have to follow the guidelines. First one, determining the standard use. One should decide whether the oven is to be primarily a meat or a dairy one. This is done by determining which type of liquid food is most frequently cooked in the oven in uncovered pots. That's the first thing they've got to do. Dry foods or foods that, let's just say, are cooked. Foods cooked in a covered pot present no zayah problems and are of no concern. There could be examples. One who often roasts meat with gravy in an open pot should consider meat the standard use over here. One who frequently bakes cheesecakes, obviously, or cheese lasagna, should use it there. We will assume that the oven has been designated as a meat one, let's assume over here, since that's most common. So usually most ovens out there will be a meaty oven. One who designates the oven as, let's say, dairy should then reverse the application. So we're going to learn what's the code of conduct if you designated an oven a certain specific type. What do you do now over here with it? So now we're going to talk about use of meat ovens for dairy foods. That's the first thing we will discuss now here in this session over here. What do we do? So we are assuming that the chosen standard is meat. That's the oven. We've got a meaty oven here. So how do we use it? So obviously we're going to use it for meaty foods regarding whether they are dry or liquid or covered or uncovered. The oven may be used for dairy foods or par foods with the following code of conduct, with the following restrictions you're going to have to take upon it over here. So friends, we've got a meaty oven, cook meaty food designated. You've only got one oven. You want to cook milky or dairy products or parva products in it. How can you do it without having kashrut issues? So first of all, you can only use dry dairy foods. That's the first thing. If one must cook or bake liquid dairy foods in the meat oven, it should be done in a pot that is completely covered. It should have tightly fitting pot cover. A baking pan should be covered tightly with aluminium foil. If one must cook or bake a liquid dairy food over here that cannot be covered, let's say cheesecake, the oven must be kashered between uses. So say to use this oven now you've got to actually kasher it in order to use it, which is a whole section below. One may bake bread to be eaten with dairy immediately after roasting meat. So that is very interesting. Bread dough is considered dry food and does not produce significant steam. So that's interesting. All of the above assumes that the oven is cleaned of any meat residue beforehand and from dairy residue afterwards. So one thing you've got to do is, if you're going to do all of this, you've got to make sure that it's completely clean. So it's got to have a clean beforehand. So there's a lot of steps over here in order to make sure that everything is fully respected. Okay. Oven cleanliness. Whenever one wishes to cook or bake dairy in the meaty oven, one must ensure that the oven obviously is clean of any meat of itself, any of the residue. So obviously if someone's going to put the aluminium foil on over here, under all foods baked in the oven avoids much but not all of the problem. Gravy may yet splatter still. There's an issue always going to be of gravy where it can trickle over on the oven walls, and that must be removed before cooking dairy foods, obviously. So you've got to clean. How about two-chambered oven? Is there any problems over there? Two-chambered ovens may be used, one chamber for meat to one for dairy. One may even bake meat and dairy simultaneously in their respective chambers. Over there, that's interesting. The steam of one chamber does not travel to the other one, so you've got to make sure there's no steam going from one to the other. And the fact that the heat travels from one oven to another is irrelevant, since the wall between the ovens is composed of two separate metal sheets. So that helps. Taste cannot travel from one surface to another without a liquid medium. So if you want to transfer taste over here, if there's going to be there's a liquid medium, it can cause a major issue. That kind of there. Now the oven vent over there. Many ovens have a vent that opens the back of the stovetop. One should avoid placing pots of one type near the vents while liquid uncovered foods of that type are cooking in an oven. since vapor from the foods in the oven may reach the pots of it. Some new ovens vent into the back burners, therefore one must obviously be careful not to cook dairy on the stovetop while meat is baking in the cooking pot, in the cooking oven. Just give me a minute, hold on. Hello? Shalom, how is everything? Oh, you went to Yerushalayim. Oh, okay. So I'm in the Merkaz now. I'm going to be back at about 1:30 or something. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thanks. Oh, what time did you go yesterday? Oh, you went night time. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'll be around at 1:30. Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay, bye. Yeah, sorry about that. That was just a telephone call and just an important issue over here, and we are good to continue. Okay. So an oven. Okay. The vent of an oven. Many ovens have a vent that opens to the back of the stovetop. One should avoid placing pots of one type near the vents while the liquid uncovered pots of the other type are cooking the oven, since vapor from the foods in the oven may reach the pots. Some newer ovens vent into the back burners, therefore one must be careful not to cook dairy on the stovetop while meat is baking or cooking in the oven over here. So there's that issues over there also. It's very interesting. Now, how do we kasher an oven from meat to dairy use over here? This is the next question here. So about the noise, over here, I'm just in a frozen yogurt place recording. The guidelines presented above will avoid most of the potential problems for one who must use one oven for both meat and dairy. However, there will be instances where these guidelines may be difficult to follow. Obviously, let's say the standard oven use is for meat, but one wishes to bake cheesecake. Cheesecake is made from a liquid batter and must be baked uncovered. Therefore, it cannot be baked in a meaty oven over here. One who wishes to bake cheesecake in an oven designated as meat must rely upon those opinions that permit kashering an oven from one use to another. And you need the opinion that they permit this. The oven will need to be kashered twice. Wow. Once from meat to dairy use before baking the cheesecake, and once after baking before using the oven for meat again. So obviously, once you've used it now for milk, now you've got to kasher it back if you want the oven to become a meaty oven again over here. So it's there is a lot of work. It's not a simple job. Now, what issues can arise when you are koshering an oven? The common custom is to kasher an oven in the following manner. First, you've got to wait 24 hours. So it shouldn't be ben yoma at the moment from absorbed taste. Cleaning the oven, what do you do? You need to coat, ideally, with grease and fat spots. One cannot kasher an oven for dairy use as long as grease remains on the oven floor, rack or sides. The oven must first be thoroughly cleaned, probably with a caustic cleaner as they call it. And I believe also, if you place the aluminium foil under utensils being used in an oven to prevent spills from reaching the oven rack and floor, this can avoid issues in general. And thoroughly burnt residue as well as stains and discolorations that are difficult to remove may remain. So if it's a discoloration, then you don't have to go mad with that. One may clean the oven before, after or during the 24-hour waiting period. So you don't totally have to wait 24 hours. You can clean at that stage also, so that's very interesting. How about kashering the oven over here? Once the oven has been thoroughly cleaned, it may be kashered by heating the oven on its highest temperature for approximately an hour. The Minchat Yitzchak actually discusses this. Preferably one should set the oven on the broil setting for approximately an hour. How about if you want to kasher it for parva use? What's the din over here? Can you do that? One who wishes to bake parva liquid foods, let's say. So say, for example, he wants to do a parva batter cake over here. In a meat oven, and wishes to eat a cake with milk, should clean the oven, either wait 24 hours or kasher the oven in the manner cited, which we learned above. Also, when kashering is not required, many times you won't need to kasher the oven. One should note that kashering is required only when one wishes to cook uncovered liquids. One who wishes to bake, let's say parva chalot in a meaty oven, may clean the oven thoroughly and immediately bake the chalot. No waiting kashering is needed. Similarly, one who wishes to bake a lasagna in a tightly covered pan doesn't need to wait 24 hours to kasher the oven. Now, the chalot are dry food that does not produce significant steam, and the lasagna over here is baked in a tightly covered pan that does not allow the steam to escape. Obviously, the pan and the chalot should not be placed directly on the oven shelf. One should place aluminium foil under the pan or foil over here. Now, the objections to kashering ovens. Let's see, why is it a problem over here? Let's see. Okay. There's been issues of objections with regards to kashering an oven. The first one, most ovens are coated with enema, which perhaps cannot be kashered. And B, merely heating the oven is an inadequate method of kashering. The more effective method of blowtorching the entire oven surface, obviously it's dangerous and it can actually ruin the oven itself. So that's another issue unto itself over here. Then another issue. Our custom is not to kasher from meat use to dairy and the reverse. Nevertheless, many who have only one oven rely upon the lenient opinions that permit kashering in a manner we learned about. Now, how about self-cleaning ovens? Are there? Many contemporary authorities permit the use of a self-cleaning oven and repeatedly kashering it from one use to the other. A partial self-cleaning cycle is as effective as the kashering process we described earlier, but not as effective as a full self-cleaning cycle. One who runs a full self-cleaning cycle is not required to clean the oven surface beforehand, since the self-cleaning cycle burns away all the food remnants. How about continuous cleaning ovens over here? The discussion, obviously, we learned about solely to self-cleaning ovens. Continuous cleaning ovens are not kashered through normal use. Obviously, in those cases, you need to ask a rabbi how to use it. Now we can learn about microwave ovens here. Now, the use of a microwave oven for both meat and dairy foods obviously is more severe. In many respects, a microwave is more problematic than other ovens. The area in a microwave oven is small and confined, thus the steam is not sufficiently vented and often condenses on the inner top oven surface. The moisture in all food steams very quickly, and even solid foods like a potato emit steam in a microwave oven. The steam in a microwave oven is not theoretical. The droplets of condensed vapor are often clearly visible on the top inside surface. Food splatter on the oven top and sides quite frequently. Some allow using one microwave oven for meat and dairy use if one follows the following guidelines. So what do? You want to use a microwave oven for meat and milk. What do you do? What's the code of conduct? Okay. First of all, the oven must be clean of any food residue. Foods cooked in a microwave, they splatter, they boil over and drip. One needs to inspect the rack, the floor, the walls, on top of the oven before use for certain. They must be assured that there's no residue that remains from previous use of the other type. Okay. The foods obviously should be covered, that's another issue. All foods cooked in a microwave emit steam. Therefore, all foods placed in the microwave should be covered at the bottom surface. One should not place meat and dairy dishes on the same surface. Foods cooked in a microwave oven boil quickly and tend to seep and spill. Thus, the bottom surface, let's say the turnable or rack, absorbs taste from both meat and dairy. One can avoid this problem by using one plate under meat dishes and another plate under dairy dishes. Preferably glass plates should be used, so ideally one should try and use a glass plate over here. Okay, there's alternative methods over here. One who wishes to use a microwave oven for meat, for dairy and parva foods should follow one of the following two procedures here. One should set aside 2 glass plates to place on the turntable, one meat and one dairy, or one can use 2 turntables. All dishes to be warmed are set on respective glass plates. Obviously they have to be covered well, either with a layer of plastic wrap or with a plate over the dish. The soup bowl can be covered with a flat plate, and a plate of chicken and rice can be covered with an inverted soup plate. Obviously before use, the oven should be checked for cleanliness, that's important. One should acquire 2 large plastic microwave containers, a meat one and a dairy one. An oven with a turntable needs round containers. All dishes to be warm should be placed in their respective containers and covered with the container covers. Large containers obviously are preferable, since their covers are less likely to pop off due to steam buildup. If the covers tend to pop off, one should puncture the covers with tiny holes to permit excess steam to escape. If the platter does not fit the plastic container, at the bowl of the platter. As above, the oven should be checked for cleanliness before use. Obviously, you've got to check it. The container should preferably be different from each other or clearly marked as meat or dairy, so you're going to have that. If you have 2 microwave ovens, it avoids a lot of hassle. So ideally, it's a good idea to have 2 microwave ovens over here. It's very important. It's actually every woman's dream, when you've got the microwave oven, to have 2 of them to avoid all these issues, all this hassle. Remember, time is money, so all these issues take money. How about how to kosher a microwave oven over here? What's the code of conduct over here? Some authorities permit kashering a microwave oven by means of first thoroughly wiping and cleaning all inside surfaces, and then boiling a bowl of water in the oven until the oven fills with steam. Some question the efficacy of kashering in this manner. In addition, it's difficult to clean the oven vents thoroughly. Certainly, one should not constantly kasher a microwave oven back and forth from one use to the other. Why is this? This method of kashering is relevant to a case of inadvertent use of dairy microwave for meat, or the reverse. One who needs to kasher a treif microwave should speak to a rabbi about it. One who is traveling and wishes to use a microwave in a motel room should wash it well and kosher in the manner described above. In addition, one should do the following. Let's say a paper or plastic plate is placed on the turntable, and all food should be put into 2 plastic bags. The bag should be placed in 2 opposite directions. The inner bag with the opening to the right, and the outer bag with the opening to the left. The bag should not be sealed, but left open a bit so that excess steam may escape a bit. So they actually say covering the food in this manner ensures that no condensed liquid drips from the oven top onto the food or the kosher container will actually happen. Which is very interesting. It's just a short summary because we learned a lot of here. Obviously, one should have 2 microwave ovens ideally. If you're using for both, just a bit of chazara, the oven must be clean of any types of residue from previous use. One should not place meat and dairy dishes on the same surface. Separate glass plates should be placed under meat and dairy. All food should be covered either with a layer of plastic wrap or with a plastic over the or with a plate over the dish. Over there. Alternatively, one places all foods into one of 2 large plastic microwave containers, one meat and one dairy. If necessary, one may puncture the covers with the tiny holes to permit excess steam to escape. Some authorities permit kashering the microwave oven by cleaning it properly and boiling a boil of water in the oven. Obviously, you've got to ask a rabbi about it. One who needs to use the microwave in a motel should kashrut as described, cover the turntable with a paper or plastic plate, and put all foods in 2 plastic bags. A bag should be left open a little bit of it. Now we're going to talk about broilers next. That's the next topic over here. We're all learning about how to keep a kosher kitchen over here in this series over here. Okay. Obviously there are 2 types of oven broilers. Many older ovens have a broiler compartment that pulls out as a drawer beneath the baking chamber. Food is broiled by a heating element above the broiling tray. Foods broiled in this type of oven usually will splatter onto inaccessible parts of the broiler surface. So this issue is not merely of zayah here, but there's a problem here of food residue. Now that's another thing, another issue over here. We've stated it's very difficult to properly clean and kasher a broiler. Can we use it for both meat and milk, or meat and fish? These are all questions. Most modern ovens obviously have this broiling element at the top of the oven chamber itself. One may broil meat in this oven without being concerned about the zayah if one cleans away the meat splatters before dairy use. They've got to do this. Obviously, any steam produced while broiling the meat is consumed by the flames of it. So, nevertheless, obviously, one should ideally wait 24 hours and then kasher the oven respectively. One intending to use an oven for broiling should acquire either an oven with a separate broiling chamber or a self-cleaning oven. So that's the ideal thing. Also, people that do self-clean their ovens may not use the same broiling tray for meat and dairy or for meat and fish because of the different issues it came. Now we're going to explore about toaster ovens now. Now it's a turn of toaster ovens we're going to speak about. Obviously there's a problem similar to the broiler over here. Foods broiled in the oven tend to splatter, and obviously it's difficult to clean properly. One should not use a toaster oven for both meat and dairy or meat and fish. One should not toast or defrost bread in a dairy toaster oven if the bread is to be used with meat. That's very, very important over here. Similarly, one should not defrost bread to be eaten with meat in a toaster oven used for fish over there, because there's issues of meat and fish we said. There's issues of obviously meat and milk, there's bigger issues. Now we're going to learn about additional zayah problems. Where are there more problems with regards to steam? Another potential steam problem, let's say, is the issue of hanging spatulas over here. Ladles or pans above a stove. Why is this? Because the effect of zayah, steam, upon the utensils, let's just say, depend upon the distance between them and the boiling pot. So utensils hanging above the stove, like say a ladle, that's suspended in close proximity to a boiling pot of chicken soup, comes into contact with hot steam and may no longer be used with dairy. So a dairy ladle in the path of a hot meat steam will become tray and must be kashered. So this will apply obviously to meat utensils suspended in close proximity to steam from dairy foods. Utensils obviously hanging far above the pot. A dairy ladle, let's say suspended a distance from the pot of chicken soup, won't become tray in the steam if the steam upon reaching the ladle is no longer hot. The ladle absorbs no meat taste and may be used if thoroughly washed beforehand. It's preferable not to suspend any utensil above the cooking pot, even if the steam is no longer hot. Why is this? Since one may forget to wash them. So there's that issue over here of forgetfulness over here, which obviously probably one of the main problems. Okay, now spice shakers. What's the deal over here? But in regards to the spice shaker, there is some concern that when one pours spice or salt into, let's say, some sort of a boiling pot, steam from the pot might enter the spice shaker or condenses on the spice container opening. Obviously, it's better to either use separate spice shakers for meat and dairy foods, or first pour the spices into one's hand and then into the pot, or to hold the spice part above the pot. How about the stove hood? Does the stove hood over here, does that pose us some sort of threat over here or not? So let's discover this over here. The stove hood. Obviously there's a Zaya problem. If steam from cooking foods reaches a hood while hot, the hood absorbs both meat and dairy tastes. Obviously it presents no kashrut problem since the hood is far above the cooking pots and the steam dissipates and cools before reaching the hood. However, if the hood is unusually low or one cooks in unusually large pots, the pots may be in close proximity to the hood. In such case, one should place larger pots on the front burners, which are usually not beneath the hood. If the hood is vented and has a fan, one should turn on the fan a bit. Now we're going to learn about cooking on a stove pot here. One must be obviously careful that there's problems that may arise when cooking meat and dairy on a stove pot. What's the first problem? Utensils touching each other. This very much we learn about in Shulchan Aruch in Tzadik Bet 98, chapter 92 over there, in Hilchot Basar V'Chalav. Meat and dairy pots cooking on a stove pot must not touch each other. If the pots do touch, if the area of contact is dry, the pots and the food are allowed. However, let's say that it's damp, then you need to ask a rabbi with regards to that. And we actually see this from a Chavat Da'at in chapter 92 and the Yad Yehuda also. How about splattering? One should not cook meat and dairy in open pots in close proximity. Obviously they can splatter into each other as they boil. That's the problem. Now, b'di'avad, if the pots were placed near each other, one need not assume that any splattering occurred and food then will be okay. I think the Rama will brush on this in Kuf Yud Chet in the Siman there. If both pots are covered, one needs not to be concerned about splattering. Some have the custom of placing a metal separator between meat and dairy pots. If splattering did occur, then you've got to ask the rabbi, naturally, over here. About steaming foods over here. Pots cooking on the stovetop should be placed so that the steam from one type cannot reach a pot of another type. Let's give examples. So a small pot of boiling milk should not be placed next to a large or a tall meat pot, lest some of the milk steam imparts to the meaty pot. One pouring hot water from an urn or an instant, let's say, water faucet into a dairy cocoa mix should be obviously careful that hot steam from the mix does not rise to the sprout or faucet. The spout should not be in or immediately above the cup. That's an important issue over here. How about stove grates? There is an opinion that permits of the same grates for both meat and dairy, since the flames are close to the grates and presumably burn away any food residue. One who notices any meat residue on a grate should remove it before placing a dairy pot on that specific grate itself. Obviously, electric stoves, there's a range of it. It's permitted in many ways, since the coils burn away from any food residue. So if it's going to burn away the food residue, they think. The other rabbis, they question this practice and advise that one keep separate grates for each type over here. Very important. Okay, now hot plates. Obviously on Shabbat, we will all use many people will use hot plates to warm their food over here. So let's find out. One should not use a hot plate for both meat and dairy foods. One may warm dairy foods on a meat hot plate if the hot plate is cleaned and covered well with a sheet of aluminium foil. If the hot plate cannot be cleaned well, one should cover it with 2 sheets of foil. Some, let's say, very careful individuals, avoid using the same hot plate for both meat and dairy. So one wants to get out of any potential issues, and one should ideally have one separate for each kind, each type of food. Now a warming drawer. What's this, friends? Okay, a warming drawer reaches temperatures that are considered yad seledet bo. Obviously, we're talking about this terminology before. Thus, one may not use one drawer for meat and dairy drawer for even consecutively. Foods, obviously, there's a problem of dripping onto the surface, and the taste can be absorbed in the drawer bottom. So, obviously, manufacturers, they claim lining the drawer with foil may damage the mechanism. The only possible method that allows one to use a drawer for both types consecutively is to cover all foods completely in foil and place them in a large foil pan. Change the pan between meat and dairy, which is very interesting. Okay. So we've talked about, just to give a few of the highlights, we've talked about using an oven for both meat and dairy foods. What procedures we've got to be careful about over here? Not roasting meat and dairy together, even if they don't touch each other. Bread that was baked simultaneously with meat may not be eaten obviously with dairy unless no other bread is available. If you want to use, let's say for example, for both meat and dairy, it should be, you've got to set a standard use for the oven itself. And many other things to talk about. We talk about spreading aluminium foil under foods and utensils. One must use the oven for liquid foods of the infrequent type cooked in an open utensil. Must kasher the oven beforehand. So if you want to cook some liquid, then you have to kasher it. Obviously, we talk about microwaves. It's better to use separate ones. And obviously, in cooking the stovetop, you've got to be careful. Spatulas, ladles, pans should not be hung above the cooking surface of the stove while food is cooking. Okay, let's continue for another minute. We've got a few more minutes, and then we will call it a day. Okay. Okay. How about use of pots of one type of foods to be eaten with the other? Using a pot of one type for foods to be eaten with other types. Obviously, we're in the nut bar nut territory, which we talked about in chapter number 3. Okay. Obviously, there's differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Let's go through. One should not initially cook par food in a meat vessel if it's to be eaten with dairy. Over here, that's what's been discussed before. You're a daya in chapter 95. According to Sephardi custom, once a par food was boiled or roasted in a clean meat pot or grill, it may then be eaten with dairy, but you can't engineer the scenario. According to Ashkenazic, even if the food was already boiled in a clean meat pot, it may not be eaten with dairy. Foods prepared in a clean meat pot may be served in the course of a dairy meal, providing they are not actually eaten with dairy itself. If food cooked in a clean meat pot was by accident mixed with dairy, it may be eaten. So if it was done accidentally, that you're not punished by it, as in chapter 95. Providing they are not actually eaten with the dairy itself. Okay. Sorry. If food cooked in a clean pot was by accident mixed with dairy, it may be eaten. As Roman 95:2 says, if food was fried, not boiled, in a meat pot and subsequently mixed with dairy food, then obviously you should speak to a rabbi over here. That's the next thing, advice you can give about that. Let's say the parva food was not cooked in a meat utensil. But merely placed while hot on a cold meat dish. It may be eaten with dairy then, if it's a cold meat dish over here. Also, Ramat speaks about it in 95. However, one should not initially place hot food on a meat plate if it's to be eaten with dairy, so that's a problem. All these rules apply to food cooked in a ben yomo pot. Food cooked in a non-ben yomo pot may be eaten with dairy. Initially, however, one should not use even a non-ben yomo pot if another pot is available. Although one may not eat food cooked in a meat pot with dairy, it may subsequently be placed, even while hot, on a dairy dish. However, one should not initially cook food in a meat pot with intention of placing it while hot in a dairy dish. He concludes over here. Obviously, everything over here applies to non-sharp foods. Is sharp foods, what would you call it, davar harif? Over here, when cooked in even a non-benyomo meat pot and subsequently mixed with dairy food, not be eaten. Likewise, there's a sharp taste of the food. Causes a transfer of primary meat taste, not merely a secondary taste. Over here. Okay. Okay. Let's summarize that some of the Sephardi traditions versus Ashkenazi. One should not cook food in a meat vessel with the intention of eating it with dairy. If the food was cooked in a clean meat pot, then it can be eaten with dairy. We spoke about, according to Ashkenazim, if it was boiled in a clean meat pot, it may not be eaten with dairy. The food cooked in a clean meat pot may be served in the course of a dairy meal. The food cooked in a clean meat pot was accidentally mixed with dairy, it may be eaten. Obviously, it's a davar harif, it's a problem. Hot parva food that had been placed on a cold meat dish may be removed and eaten with dairy. Parva foods cooked in a non-benyomo meat pot obviously may be eaten with dairy. Obviously, one should not even use a non-benyomo pot if another pot is available. Parva food cooked in a clean meat pot may be placed even while hot on a dairy dish. Obviously, sharp foods is problematic, which is spoken about before. Okay, friends, we're going to leave it here for today. Hope this was good. The next session is going to be Kashrut of a night. We'll be in chapter number 8. So wishing you all a great day and take care.